this team has overachieved. This is not a vintage Indiana team in personnel.
We trained, number one, till we got to a point where we trusted each other. We trusted our system. Different guys made plays throughout the year. You know, Dean Garrett having a tip in, Joe Hillman having a shot, Darryl Thomas, Rick Calloway, of course myself, Steve Alford at Michigan having a big shot that kept us on track.
7 team exemplifies the word team. Bob Knight's 3 championship teams, or actually of any of the 5 championship teams, man for man, they might have been the least talented of the 5, but the sum was greater than the parts.
Welcome to episode 7 of Iconic Seasons 1987, the year that saw one of the most iconic matchups in NCAA basketball history. On today's episode, we're going to be telling the story of Indiana's 1987 season. This team was the epitome of Bob Knight's basketball system and mentality. Tough, disciplined, together. We also have our first of 3 interviews with Joe Hillman. He was an integral piece to that championship team and tells some amazing stories. If you're a fan of the Hoosiers or basketball, you don't want to miss this episode. Tune in, and if you like it, leave us a rating or review. This is episode 7 of Iconic Seasons 1987. The 1987 Indiana basketball team was looking to redeem themselves. 1986 had ended with a March disappointment. They'd been upset by Cleveland State in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but they were also looking to avoid a dubious historical distinction. The senior class, led by sharpshooter Steve Alford, never won a Big Ten championship, and no team in the Bob Knight era had ever graduated without winning at least one conference title. But that season really started with our final originating point. We'd previously talked about the origin stories for the 1987 IU team, including the big trip to China and that loss to Cleveland State. But the real origin story starts with Coach Knight and a willingness to adapt, even if it was begrudgingly. 3 years ago, Bob Knight, who doesn't often do it, changed his mind. After spending years shaping his disdain for junior college players in a kind of philosophy designed to keep outlaws and academic misfits out of his program, had finally decided it was time to permit some JUCO players into the program. This plan was still unproved when Dean Garrett and Keith Smart arrived at Indiana. Initially, they were looked at as some kind of social engineering. Dean and I got tired of hearing about junior college players, like we were orphans or something, said Smart. When the Hoosiers defeated Syracuse for the NCAA Championship, Smart and Garrett played crucial roles, and Knight admitted asking himself, why didn't I do this before?
It did not have in its arsenal last year.
They were a perfect fit. It was like they had been there for years.
Knight had steadfastly held his line against junior college players until that 1984-85 season when the Hoosiers went 19-14. That season was complete with mass benchings, a starter being tossed off the team, and many fans of Indiana questioning Knight's coaching for the first time. Coach Joby Wright said that many people talk about the 1986 as the season on the brink, since that's when the famous book came out. But he refers to 1984-85 as the real season on the brink. It was that season that forced Knight to accept the fact that his system alone was not enough. Knight had insisted on recruiting only in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio, but the talent there wasn't enough at that time. Joby Wright noted that they needed athletes, players who could jump and were quick enough to play the game as it evolved in the shot clock era. There were teams running lob dunk plays on them all the time, and they couldn't defend it. Keith Smart had spent his own season on the brink as a junior at McKinley High School in Baton Rouge, on the brink of 5'4". By his senior year, he began to receive enough playing time to show what he could do, but 3 games into the season, he broke his right wrist. Fortunately, the injury was not to Smart's spatula hand, and it didn't interfere with what he did best in his life, flipping burgers at McDonald's. For nearly 3 years, he wore his paper hat proudly. He says, in retrospect, I was happy flipping burgers, he said.
There in Freddie Banks. Well, here's a young man who was flipping McDonald's in Baton Rouge for a year. He was cooking the burgers down there as Keith Smart
He was also reluctant to come to Indiana. Knight blew into town like a cyclone for a recruiting visit. Smart, who had not gotten the word about this visit, had some work done to his hair. He commented at the time, "I had seen Coach Knight grab a player by the jersey once, and I thought to myself, right then, no way I could ever play for that man." When he met Knight for the first time, he showed up in the locker room with a circle cut around the top of his head and 2 arrows carved out of the back and 7 or 8 gold chains. When Coach Knight saw me, he didn't say a word. He just stared. But Smart went on and visited the Indiana campus and was impressed that he had to spend an entire day in the classroom talking to professors. He knew how important graduation was to his mother, Rose, who cooked and cleaned at the Sisters of the St. Joseph Covenant in Baton Rouge. When Keith and Garrett finally got to campus, everyone was watching how the junior college transfers would do. They both commented that it was a lot of pressure, but it also brought them together and made them unbelievably close, almost like brothers. Garrett grew up in Southern California, where he finished high school at 6'8", 176 pounds. Not exactly Big Ten ready. He entered City College of San Francisco, but at the end of his freshman year, he got 8 D's and F's. It definitely didn't please his coach, Dugan, who made him run the gym stairs for 98 consecutive days, often at 6 a.m. In the end, they both performed brilliantly. And as we talk to Joe Hillman about the season and recap the season here, we can see the impact that this adaptation made to the Indiana team, coalescing around these 2 players and their disparate pathways to Indiana University. Steve Alford was the leading scorer on the 1987 team, and holdover power forward Daryl Thomas joined him in the senior class. Rick Calloway was a smooth and athletic small forward, but there were holes at the point guard and center that Knight had filled with Keith Smart and Dean Garrett. It was an unusual route, but they were the perfect pairing. IU came through some tough times in the early part of the season, less about on-the-court performance and more about a brief suspension of Thomas for not going to class. The senior got back on track, and the team was enjoying a big year. The problem was it was a strong year in the Big Ten. Purdue would be in the hunt all year, as would Illinois. And no offense in the conference, perhaps the nation, could score quicker than Iowa. Under a fast-paced style by Tom Davis, they hung 101 points on the Hoosiers in January for a win in Iowa City. Indiana went through a trying stretch on the court in conference play, barely getting by 3 cellar dwellers, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. The game against the Badgers was a 9 p.m. Eastern start for ESPN, which was coming into its own. The game went into triple overtime before Garrett scored the game winner in an 86-85 final. The game was best known for Knight lambasting the late starts for television. He noted how late the kids were going to be back on campus on a school night and asked, "Where's the priorities?" I love this take. The mediocre performance and late nights didn't stop Indiana from getting revenge on Iowa's return trip to Bloomington. But against Illinois, they faltered, and it allowed Purdue to hold a 1-game lead in the conference coming into the final week. The goals of Alford, Thomas, and reserve forward Todd Meyer, the third part of the senior class, were in serious jeopardy. Indiana took care of its business, winning both of their games. On the final day of the regular season, as Alford signed autographs after a 90-81 win over Ohio State, the word came through to him. Michigan was killing Purdue, and the Hoosiers would share the Big Ten crown with the Boilermakers. The Hoosiers were the number 1 seed in the Midwest Regional, and the first 2 games would be in Indianapolis. The blowout win over Fairfield to start the tournament could have happened anywhere, but a home crowd advantage was surely a help when they fell behind Auburn 24-10. After chewing out from the head coach, Indiana quickly turned the game around, and they won 107-90. The win sent them on to Cincinnati for the regionals, where Duke would be the opponent, while LSU and DePaul faced off in the other semifinal.
By former Bob Knight player and assistant Mike Krzyzewski. The pregame headlines trumpeted the first meeting between mentor and pupil.
Charging foul. Hey, this is going to be a very difficult team to play against because they play like us. And it's going to be like playing against the white team in practice.
Are they going at it out there now?
It's such a grinder of a game. And it's one of those you get done with and go, man, that was just one heck of a defensive battle.
Today, the names of Bob Knight and Mike Krzyzewski are inextricably linked, with the mentor-protege relationship being well known, and Krzyzewski breaking Knight's all-time career wins record. Back then, even though Coach K had made his first Final Four appearance the previous year, he was still the up-and-comer without a ring, while Knight was the legend who'd already won it all twice. This year, Knight had the better team. Duke got out to a 29-21 lead, but the Hoosiers had a 10-point lead by halftime. Callaway played in his hometown and scored 21 points, and Smart added 21 more. Indiana shot 56%, won the rebounding battle, and eventually won the game 88-82. On the other side of the draw, LSU, the number 11 seed in the region, upset the number 2 seed, DePaul, and was looking to make the Final Four for the second straight year as a double-digit seed. Indiana was the solid favorite, but they only led by 1 at the half, and LSU controlled the early part of the second half, moving out to a 12-point lead. During one of the Tiger runs, Knight became angry at the officials and went to the scorer's bench where the NCAA officials were and pleaded his case. There's a lasting image of this as Knight pounded on the courtside phone and the receiver sprung up. The phone incident eventually cost IU a $10,000 fine, and for a few years, Knight and LSU coach Dale Brown were enemies over what the Tiger coach perceived as intimidating the officials.
2 minutes playing man-to-man. Alford and Smart are being handled man-to-man.
Pass is off to Callaway.
Charge. Oh, he called 3 seconds instead of a charge. Dale Brown's working him.
Violation. No basket. Now it'll be Knight's turn, and he's up and furious. Continues. You saw him coming out as we started commercial. He was assessed a technical foul for coming out on the floor by referee Tom Frame. He went over to the table. Dick Schreider there along with Gene Corrigan speaking to the two, and he hits the telephone over on the scorer's table. In danger of getting a second technical.
How about that moment in the first half when Bobby Knight exploded and was called for the technical? Almost got a second one here. Hey, we all get mad at the phone company every now and then, but that almost got him a second tee there.
And I think Bob Knight is smart enough to know not to push it too far.
You know, during the whole tournament, the guys at CBS made a big deal about you baiting referees. And they said, well, you got to give Bobby automatically 8 points going into any game because he controls the referees. Now, is there any truth to that?
See, most of those guys that come up with those ideas are coaches that weren't very good when they were coaching, so they've turned to broadcasting. I've always said that if we could take all those analysts and give them teams and then play those teams, you'd have a hell of a record every year.
If you go out, like in the LSU game, you went out onto the floor and you wanted to get the attention of one of the officials, what did you say to the guy?
I wanted to ask a question. There had been a play at the other end of the floor from our bench where an official had made a sign indicating a 3-second violation. And then followed that up with something that I thought looked like a charge. And I thought there had been a foul committed. I didn't know which way. And right after that, immediately, there's a timeout, dead ball, TV timeout. And I turned to our coaches and I said, what was the call? And nobody really knew. Well, really, I should have gone to the scorer's table. But there's an official about from me to the camera, and I hollered at him, and it's loud, and all I want to do is find out what the call was. And in our league, we almost without exception can say something to an official, and if you approach him in the right way, he may say, wait a minute, I'll come over and see what you want. But I stepped out on the floor, and he still couldn't hear me. He's got his back turned to the play, and I went out on the court, and all I got out was, what was and he bang, technical. And I honestly think that I startled the guy. I don't think he expected me to be there. And once I startled him, he startled the hell out of me. I want to tell you that. And so then I got upset, not just at his having called the technical, but the technical being called and getting into a situation where I wasn't complaining.
And then all of a sudden the people are saying, well, it's Bobby working the referees again.
Exactly.
LSU was still leading 75-68 with 5 minutes to play. A fast break basket by six-man Joe Hillman and a foul cut the lead to 4. The Hoosiers were down by a point, 76-75, when Tiger guard Fess Irvin went to the line to shoot a 1-and-1. He missed the front end. Indiana brought it down the floor. Thomas took what looked like the final shot from the lane, and it came up an air ball. But Callaway swooped in for the rebound and put it back. Indiana had survived 77-76, and the Cincinnati Kid was the hero. The Final Four in New Orleans paired Indiana with fellow number 1 seed UNLV in a high-profile semifinal. The Rebels were generally seen as the best team in the country, with the potent backcourt led by Mark Wade distributing and Freddie Banks scoring. Armand Gilliam was as good a power forward as there was in the nation, and any team coached by Jerry Tarkanian would play hard. Knight had resisted extensive use of the three-point shot, even though his roster included one of the most gifted scorers in the nation. Although Steve Alford shot better than 50% from the three-point line, Indiana opponents led the Hoosiers in attempts during the regular season and through the first 5 games of the NCAA tournament. It's the thing I like least about basketball, Knight said, on more than one occasion.
What do you think about the three-point play in college ball? I know you hated it when it first came into effect, but you won some ball games with it, didn't you?
Well, we actually won the championship game with it, or Steve Alford did. But
7 out of 10?
Yes, and Syracuse had hit 3, so we had a 4-point difference with it. But I really don't like it. It's like if you hit a home run 450 feet, you ought to get 2 runs for it. And or you throw a 40-yard touchdown pass, get 9 points. I don't really like anything that you come up and stop and shoot it, and it just don't think it fits in what my concept of the game is. But I think so many people like it, and I really think the fans have liked it.
Yeah, it's here to stay then, you guess.
It'd really help a guy like you.
Before the game, he couldn't resist needling Ed Stites, the secretary and editor of the NCAA Rules Committee and a prime spokesman for the controversial shot introduced in the 1987 season. He branded Stites, whom he called a friend, as the father of the three-point field goal, which he likened to being the father of what would be Facebook or Meta. He said Etzel at the time, an old car that failed. He collared the man minutes before the Hoosiers played the trigger-happy UNLV in the national semifinals and said, "I sure hope your baby doesn't kill us." That the three-point shot did not win the day had nothing to do with the UNLV Rebels' restraint. They shot 34 threes, basically inventing modern basketball. Freddie Banks had a record 13 threes, and Armand Gillian scored 32 points and pulled down 10 rebounds. But it was Indiana's adaptation and the decision to run with UNLV that was the difference. Alford poured in 33 points while the Hoosiers weren't as prolific from behind the stripe. The Hoosiers outshot Vegas from the floor 62% to 43% on field goals. They led 88-76 and held off a furious rally by UNLV that cut the lead to 4. It ended 97-93. Syracuse would be the opponent in the Monday night final at the Superdome. The Orange had 3 future NBA players in the starting lineup, with power forward Derek Coleman, center Ronnie Cycli, and point guard Sherman Douglas. All would have productive pro careers. Alford was the only player on Indiana's roster who would last more than a year at the next level, and that was far from productive. It's a singular testament to Knight's coaching that not only did this group win a national title, but they were so efficient all year that they actually entered this title clash as the favorite to beat the Orange. This game was an absolute back-and-forth classic, and this time Indiana would benefit from the three-point shot. Alford hit an amazing 7 for 7 from behind the arc, including one right before half that put IU up by a point at intermission. Coleman was a rebounding machine, ferociously pulling down 19 boards by the night's end. And Syracuse opened up some breathing room at 52-44 in the second half. It was time for Knight to turn to another hometown hero. Smart hailed from up the road in Baton Rouge. He'd been briefly sat down by his coach with an admonishment to settle down. With the championship in the balance, Smart took over the game. He had 23 points for the game, and 12 came in the final 5 minutes. Trailing 72-68, he drove baseline for a reverse layup. When he went to tie it one trip later, his short jumper missed, and it was rebounded by Syracuse forward Howard Trish, who was immediately fouled. Trish hit the first free throw, but missed the second. Smart grabbed the long rebound off and rapidly sprinted the other way for a basket that cut it to 1 as the clock neared the half-minute mark. It was a play that Syracuse coach Jim Boeheim would look back on with regret, feeling that he should have pulled his rebounders off the lane and kept the defense back. It wasn't that Smart had scored, it was that Indiana had only used a few seconds of time to cut the lead to 2. Still, the Orange had the lead and just needed to hit their free throws. It was freshman Coleman who was fouled and had a chance. Coleman was in position to be the most outstanding player of the Final Four, but he missed the front end of the 1-and-1. Now, that extra time Boeheim lamented came into play as Indiana was able to work the ball around, first seeing if Alford could take the final shot, and then looking for other options as their captain was closed off. Thomas had the chance to take a decent shot from the free throw line, but he saw Smart whirling around his side and slipped him the ball. Smart's dribble took him close to the baseline, and he pulled up for a shot that, with 4 seconds left, won the championship. The final was 74-73. It was the 5th national championship in Indiana basketball history, and their coach's 3rd. Bob Knight had taken a special place in history. In a year when the movie Hoosiers, one of the greatest sports films ever, came out, the 1987 Indiana basketball team had provided what seemed like a scripted ending to their storybook season.
We hope that you've enjoyed the storytelling of the 1987 Hoosiers. Now, stay tuned for the first of 3 interviews with Joe Hillman.
Coach Knight came out to meet me, I was just coming down from Stanford at my first recruiting trip. I went to Stanford, got home on that Sunday, and my dad picked me up and said, hey, we're meeting Coach Newell and Coach Knight at Santa Anita at the Turf Club. You got to go put on a coat and tie. And I'm like, all right, well, that's great. We get to go to the track because Pete Newell loved the track. I grew up 15 minutes from Santa Anita. So we go and Coach Knight grabs me and says, hey, let's go talk. So we go on our own, and we're sitting down and we're overlooking the racetrack. And if you've ever been to Santa Anita, San Gabriel Mountains are up there. And I mean, it's just a spectacular view. And Coach Knight says, well, Pete Newell tells me you can play. He's never told me about a kid before. But if Pete tells me you can play, I'm pretty sure you can play. But why do you want to go to Indiana? We don't have anything like this. Yeah. And I said, well, I want to play in a national championship team, and that's not happening in the Pac-10. And he said, I can't guarantee you one, but I'll guarantee you 4 chances of it. And Coach Knight was the most honest coach when it came to the whole recruitment. And he didn't blow smoke up my rear end. He just said, hey, here's how it works in Indiana. You're probably not going to play much as a freshman. You're going to contribute as a sophomore. And then you're going to start your junior and senior years, which is exactly what happened. Everybody else is telling me, hey, we need you. You're going to start. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And it's like, man, you guys must not be very good. If some freshman. Now, I thought I was pretty good. So I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I can do that. But Coach Knight was the most honest. And he just said, hey, here's the deal. I don't know if you're going to like it. Do not sign early. Why don't you come to Bloomington when we have a game, because I want you to experience what this is all about. And he said, if you like it, you come. If you don't, then that's fine. I get it. No big deal. In between me going to Bloomington for my trip, Jim Cruz came out, saw me play. Watched a bunch of film, and then I went out and made my trip, and that was kind of the end of it. It was kind of funny. They played the Italian national team in the game that I went to. The place was packed. Stu Robinson hit a shot to win the game, and as we're walking off the floor, Coach Knight puts his arm around me and says, are you coming or aren't you? I mean, I'm 7 years old by myself. And I said, well, I need to go talk to my dad. He goes, no. Are you coming or aren't you? I didn't answer. And I said, I really need to go talk to my dad. He goes, I'm going to ask you one more time. This is your choice, not your dad's choice. Are you coming or aren't you? And I said, yeah, I love this. This is me. I'm coming. He goes, pass me on the back. I said, okay, I'll talk to you later. I never saw him again. So he ended up calling me a couple weeks later and said, hey, why don't we just commit and get this done with? And so that's what happened.
You know, you said something in there too, talking about winning. Is that why you knew about Indiana? Like, how did you, as a California kid, even know where Indiana was? Because I know a lot of people when I was living in California weren't quite sure where Indiana was, except in the middle somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you, Aaron, where it started was when ESPN kind of got cranked up in 79, 80. They showed a lot of Indiana games. And I was watching Isaiah and Whitman and Kitchell and Ray Tolbert and even Woody in 80. Then my dad picked Indiana in his brackets in 1981 in this pool that he had at the office. Oh, yes. And they weren't like top 10 or anything. I don't even know where they were at the end of the year. But he said, look, this team's playing unbelievable.
This team, I think, to this point, just deserves a tremendous amount of credit for staying in there. I think we've made some great improvement in that regard. Last year or the year before, I don't think we'd have won the 3 games that we just won leading up to the hour.
And we watched them the whole way through any game that we could get. And I just remember my dad, he won his office pool because Indiana won. So after that, then I really followed them a lot in 82, 83 because they were on quite a bit on ESPN when it first started. And the style of play, the motion offense, I love that. And that's what I grew up playing, and it helped me. I didn't want to just run sets because even as a kid, I never believed in just A, B, C, D basketball, because if B's taken away, what do you got? You got one-on-one. Well, that wasn't going to help me.
Your players have got to be taught by you how to play the game. You see, it's no more difficult, Winston, to open up and see the ball than it is to turn your back and not see the ball. So why not do the right thing?
The style of play, the fan interest. When I walked into Assembly Hall, it was like, oh my gosh, this is it. Because where I grew up, everybody thought I was going to go to SC because my dad went to SC. A guy that was a year older than me in my high school, Ron Young, was a really good player. He goes to SC the year before me, and his dad and my dad played together at SC. So everybody's talking Hillman and Young, going back to SC. But you'd go to a game, there'd be 2,500 people there. You go up to Stanford, 5,000 seat, 6,000 seat arena. I had no interest in going to UCLA whatsoever. So when I see what, comparative to what that was, and I come back to Bloomington, it was a no-brainer. But I had no idea. I really had no idea what I was getting into as far as the lifestyle change and just the things that you can do in Glendale as far as when you're bored, you get in your car and drive 30 minutes, you're at the beach, you could go 2 hours and you could be skiing in the same day.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a culture shock, but now I would never go back to LA. No chance. Well, it's a great observation, and it's because it's not easy. You know what's real easy? Running high pick and roll and 3 guys standing outside the 3-point line. And you know where that's all started? It started in the NBA, then it trickled down into AAU because AAU doesn't have a practice. They just get together and play games. So what's real easy to run? Get your best ball handler, a guy can make plays, screen up, and let other 3 guys stand around and shoot. Great.
Yeah.
You know, but if you're going to have that, you better have guys that can shoot, which what Indiana hasn't had the last 4 years. I mean, you better have some guys that can shoot the ball if you're going to do that.
Yeah.
But it's real easy to coach. I mean, what do you have to do? What are you coaching if you run a pick and roll? What are you teaching? Nothing.
Yeah.
You don't have to teach anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always thought with motion offense too, everybody felt a part of it. So whether you were the cutter or the screener, you know, it doesn't matter. You had a role within that.
You know who gets the most shots in offense is the guy who sets a good screen. Because if you go down and set a good screen, your guy that's guarding you normally has to go and hedge and help, and you can step back off that screen and get shot. You obviously know what you're talking about because all 5 guys are involved. And it makes it so much harder for the defense because they got to worry about, who's going to come in and screen me? Who's going to bang me? Where's my cutter going? And it's one of the reasons why we shot so many free throws because guys are grabbing, holding, and when you're coming off and you read the cut the right way, you got an advantage. If you've curled and gone tight, that guy's chasing you. He's going to have to reach in, foul, or whatever. But think about this. Indiana is lucky right now to score 60 points in a game. It's almost embarrassing. And there's a shot clock at 30, a reset at 20. So there's way more possessions offensively in a game than there was when we played. And yet we probably averaged 75, 80 points a game. So you tell me which one's better.
Offensively, we're trying to teach cutting and screening, handling the basketball without making mistakes, getting good shots. My very close friend Pete Newell, who I think is perhaps the greatest coach we've ever seen, sums up basketball simply by saying you have to get more shots than they do, and you have to get better shots than they get. That talks about both your offensive play and your defensive play.
Because we shot a lot of free throws just because guys were reaching and grabbing, but we had guys that could shoot too. To me, it's just a fun way to play basketball. Why do you want to be the guy that goes over and stands in the left-hand corner when they're playing pick and roll on their high right side and you're hoping he throws you a long hook pass so you can catch and shoot? That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. Back in the day, when Reggie Miller or some of these other great shooters, they didn't have the free green light just to launch up a 30-footer and the analytics say, hey, you take enough of these, it's going to be fine, it's going to work out. No, that's not the way it was played. It's just so, you know, I hear people say all the time, how do you think your team would do against teams today? I said, well, I'd like to know how they do against us because we had 22 and 23-year-olds and we were hard to guard.
Yeah.
And they were so much more athletic and this and that. I said, whoa, time out. You don't think Keith Smart could jump as high as anybody that's playing right now? Ricky Callaway, I could dunk from the free throw line. Dean Garrett was 6'10", bigger than anybody that's playing right now. You know, Daryl Thomas would dominate in the post in college basketball right now because he's got moves. I mean, look at what Trace Jackson Davis does right now. Yeah. He scores 20 points a game with no right hand. Daryl could go right and go left at a jumper, could make shots from 15 feet. You know, so a guy asked me that, and I just happened to be watching the game when Watford hit the shot against Kentucky. And I called him, and I said, hey, you don't think that team would pound the hell out of us right now? I said, with Watford, Oladipo, Zeller, Sheehy, Hulse, whoever else you want to name, would kill us. That's 9 years ago. So don't tell me we're not going to go back farther. And, you know, the problem with college basketball for me today is you have so many young guys playing right away, and the NBA has gotten away from being the 450 best players. It's the 300 best players and 150 projects and potential players. And it's hurt college basketball because you don't see any big guys that stay until they're a senior. And then if they do, look what happens. Seniors and juniors win in college basketball. I don't care how good you are.
We had the parts. Now it was just how tough were we going to be mentally. You knew what Indiana on the front meant.
We had been awfully close. We'd been finished second 2 years out of the 3, but there'd never been a Coach Knight coach team that hadn't won a Big Ten championship in a 4-year period, and we didn't want to be the first of that.
We had a team meeting one time, and Coach Knight said, you seniors can probably be the only seniors that will sit at a table and not have a Big Ten championship ring. And that kind of set the table for those seniors.
I think you have to make a decision as a program. Are we going to go after a bunch of one-and-dones every year, or are we going to build a program so that we've got juniors and seniors that are playing and we're reloading those each time? Because it's not the glamorous way to do it, but it's the most effective way to win year in and year out. Because you're not going to always get that one-and-done guy. Look what happened. Everybody was like, oh, Romeo Langford's in here. You know, he's a great player, blah, blah, blah. He went and stood in the corner on pick and roll. Great. We never got him the ball cut into the hoop. The guy was great at going to the basket and getting fouled. Why wouldn't you run your whole thing with down screens and back screens and him going, well, no, because we don't run that. I mean, come on. If not, at 3 seconds left on the clock, you're going to get that same wide open, terrible 3 that you take with 18 seconds on the clock. I don't understand why it's not a situation where we are stuffing one guy. You don't have to keep everybody happy. You know what keeps everybody happy, guys?
Winning.
Win. It makes recruiting a lot easier too, because everybody wants to come and play with you. Look at our team in '87, Joe. We had one guy from Indiana that was a contributing factor, Alfred, and that was it. Everybody else was from Illinois, Wisconsin, California, Louisiana, Ohio. It's because guys wanted to come to Bloomington and play and win. If you win, guys want to go there. Yeah, I think, first of all, let's go to the trip. The China trip was, now that I'm 55, almost 55, was one of the greatest trips I've ever been on. I mean, we got to see things that most people will never get a chance to see. At the time, it was miserable. We had just come off a terrible season. Coach was going through a divorce. Alford was dead tired. He did not want to go on this trip. And we had to go back to Bloomington for 2 weeks. So we went home for a month, came back to Bloomington for 2 weeks, and then we're gone for 6 weeks, traveling around. And at first it was supposed to be, hey, we're going to go do this, that. No, coach is going to be up in the stands. No film. No. Well, that lasted one game. And Coach Knight's yelling from the stands, and he finally just said, nope, I'm on the bench. And we didn't start off very well. We went 2-7 in the 9 games, and Japan was like, oh, this is not good. But then after that, it was a great trip. We had a lot of fun. But I think the biggest thing on how do you build a culture, we had a culture. And then that culture's been broken the last 21 years. Not even so much with Mike Davis, because he kind of got it. He'd been involved in it. But when Sampson came in, when Crean came in, and when Archie Miller came in, there was – and Crean tried. Tom Crean tried. But the other 2 guys were like, nah, you know what? Coach Knight, I don't recruit one guy that was born when we won a national championship in '87. So, and I fired it. I remember that was the first thing Kelvin Sampson said to me. And I said, well, Kelvin, I said, you think UCLA uses John Wooden at all? And he went, oh, yeah, good point. I said, so you're crazy not to keep this. And so that culture tradition was broken because coaches that came in had a mentality and a strong personality of their own. No, we're going to do this my way. You don't remember when he said, hey, we were down 10 or 12 minutes ago, I looked to my right and saw Bill Brown still had a chance. And I'll take it a little step backwards here. We never talked about winning national championships. With Bob Knight, it was always, we're going to win the Big Ten. Let's win the Big Ten. That's the goal.
It didn't really dawn on us that I think as a group that we could win a national championship until we beat Ohio State on the last day of the year. We were able to know that, okay, we've won a Big Ten championship now. Let's see if we can get on a 6-game roll.
Because in the tournament, you got to have some luck. And we played terrible against LSU. Part of it was LSU. Part of it was we didn't play very well. And we kind of got lucky in that game. They missed some free throws, missed some shots, but we made plays down the stretch, which is where we were usually pretty good. If you go back, at least when I was there, we didn't lose many close games. If we got beat, we got beat. The one game that comes to mind that we lost that was close was when Nick Anderson hit the shot when I was a senior. But in the LSU game, it was just a struggle. It was a grind, and we just weren't making shots. They were making it hard. They kept switching from boxing one to zone to man-to-man. So, I mean, they really did a nice job of taking us out of things. But, we just kept plugging away. And then when Callaway goes in for that dunk and he misses, and then he goes down in a heap and is like, oh, man, nothing's going right today. Here's a dunk that Ricky never misses. And, now he's hurt. Is he going to be able to play? And it's like, oh, this just isn't our day. That kind of goes through your mind. But then you get it down to 5, you get it down to 4, and now you're in almost, all right, we got nothing to lose here type of deal.
Yeah.
And you always see that with teams in the tournament. All of a sudden, something just clicks. You go, oh, we got to go here because we got nothing to lose. And we made enough plays down the stretch to win that game. And like I said, they missed some free throws, but we fouled the right guys and we knew who we wanted to foul. So trust me, we didn't just foul guys. We fouled the right guys, but that was on purpose. I mean, we knew who to foul. That's part of having a winning culture.
Let them get the ball.
They throw it to, let's foul one of them.
Get it reversed, good. While we have to correct mistakes and correct them immediately, I think as a coach you've got to do it very quickly, or you must take that player out of the situation and continue the drill and correct his mistakes on the sideline.
This is a great story. We beat LSU, and I think it was on Sunday. We beat LSU on a Sunday, so we get back kind of late, and now we're going to the Final Four. We're going to play on Saturday. So we go in and say, all right, here's the deal. We are not going to play against Vegas' D for 45 seconds. I want the first good shot taken. I don't care who it is. We're getting rid of the 4 pass. If you get a good open look, you take it. Because I know they'll give us some good shots early on in the shot clock, but I don't want to grind this down. They'll wear us out, and they'll thump us. But if we get good open looks, we'll score at will on these guys. And we all look at each other and go, oh, my God, we're good to go.
Bob Knight has lost his mind. I mean, how can this possibly work in a 40-minute game?
Coming down before we got there to the Final Four, we're watching everything on television and heard the different commentators say different things, heard the UNLV players say different things. They've never played against a team that's going to run up and down the floor like us or put the defense on us like we all said. Y'all have never played for a coach like we have.
And everybody thought the only way we could beat them was to try to slow them down and keep their high-powered offense, which averaged 90-some points a game, in check.
All on it, fakes and he gets inside banks.
Coach Knight did just the opposite. He says, we're going to outrun and gun them.
But people didn't realize we actually ran a lot as well.
Smart breaks deep, comes inside, Gilliam hits the layup against the full-court pressure defense. Bob Knight will do that.
The game never separated. It never got too far away. And then there was a moment in the game where we broke it open and ended up pulling out the win.
Smart for the layup, and it's a big one. It's a huge layup, 92-85, 119. That could do it for the Hoosiers.
And then we go on to play Syracuse in the championship game, and that's the game in Indiana history where Keith Smart hit the shot heard around the world.
And that's how it started. And we had a great practice on Tuesday and Wednesday, really good practice again Thursday, and we didn't go down. I remember Coach saying specifically, hey, all these other teams are down there already. You know what? You guys want to go to New Orleans and have fun? Do it when you graduate. So we go through our little warm-up, and he goes, all right, Red, bring it in, which meant the first team bring it in against White. White converted. First possession, Alford hits a three, and he goes, all right, let's go. We're ready to go. We're going to go win a national championship. And we went in, took a shower, and got on the bus. And just his ability to see what – there was something that clicked to him that said, if we grind this out, they are really going to clamp us down late in the shot clock. But in the first 15, 20 seconds, we can get good looks. So let's just do it. I mean, that was pretty brilliant. And it's really interesting. I think, Coach went to that three-guard lineup in the championship game, and we played quite a bit of it in the Vegas game. And I think that's kind of what got him to like, hey, look, Joe can guard bigger guys, because in the finals I guarded Trish. Yep. And he was like, this just frees up our offense a little bit. What the opposing coach will do when you put a smaller lineup up, they all go smaller because they're worried on the defensive end. Can they guard? Can they guard? And even Boeheim did it in the finals. When I was out there and we were playing three guards, he brought in Stevie Thompson and they took Trish out and they went smaller, which is huge for us. The thing with the motion offense was we had specific rules on you had to be outside the lane. You had to be up off of the baseline so you could back cut and there was room. You had to be offside the lane so when guys cut in the lane, there was room. But the hardest thing about guarding it was the cutter was always looking where the defender was. So if the cutter goes to make his cut and the guy chases, you go tight. If the defender guarding the cutter goes underneath the screen, you step back. So that is hard to teach guys because everybody just wants to go 100 miles an hour and cut tight, get it to the elbow and shoot it. Run around guarding Alford for a year, 2 years, you learn, and he was great at it. And all the great scorers, Calvert Cheney was great at it. Woodson was great at it. Scott May was great at it. Brian Evans was great at it. When you learn how to come off that screen and read where the defense is, you go away from that, and that's how you get open. That's the thing that's hard to teach because you got to have guys that understand what you're looking at, and you can't be in a hurry. Coach always talked about be a step slow offensively.
You realize you got 4 other guys out here playing, don't you? I mean, you got to learn to use your imagination. Imagination is one of the most important things a basketball player can have. If you don't have an imagination, then it's very tough to recognize and anticipate. You guys are 3-on-3 right here. Where do the other 4 guys go?
Be a step ahead defensively. On offense, let stuff happen. You got to read that D. And then as the guy that was passing the ball, you kind of had to read a couple guys. You had to read the screener's defender because if he jumped in the passing lane, you could. So you were always looking to throw the ball away from the opposing team. So you had to kind of watch what was going on. And so that guy had a difficult time because you couldn't just assume the guy was going to cut tight. Coach Knight brought that up. He made a comment after the game about that. But, so what happened in that whole sequence, I played probably the last 2-3 minutes of the first half, and then Keith hadn't played very well. Coach Knight was after him a little bit at halftime. But nothing bad. Halftime was real calm in that game. Like, hey, look, we haven't played very well. We're up 1. We can do better. Keith started off poorly. Coach takes him out. And Keith, I've heard Keith say a story. He puts him back in and says, right, this is your last chance because if you don't go in and play, I can't use you tonight.
When Knight sent in Junior Keith Smart, who authored a series of remarkable plays, scoring 7 points, assisting on 4 more.
Here's Smart again. He's sliding inside, creating a basket. Strong rebound by Smart. Smart penetrates a nice pass underneath the Thomas. Smart comes back at the other end with a driving layup. He has taken over here in the second half.
With less than 5 minutes to play, Smart had tied the game.
Every little kid goes through in the bedroom shooting a trash can, in backyard shooting at a hoop, taking a shot to win it. And I've always had a vision of doing something like that. And I started having this dream vision my freshman year, where I was a part of a team, and I was not involved in the action. But at the end of the dream, I was in the middle of all the celebration. I was in a huge arena. Now, where this huge arena would be, I had no idea. And that morning, I woke up probably around very early, 4 o'clock in the morning, couldn't sleep, and it was clear.
They're not giving him the ball. Douglas penetrates and gets it to Cyclade.
And so as the game moved on, now Syracuse started to make their run. And Coach Knight came up to me and said, are you ready to play? And I said, yeah. He said, well, I'll give you a couple minutes. And if you haven't done anything in a couple minutes, I'm taking you out of the game.
Knight gives a few words of leadership advice to Smart on what he wants done.
Things started to work for me, started to open up. And I started to make plays for myself and also for my teammates.
And they hit Thomas with a great pass from Smart.
Then you move into this environment that not a lot of people get into. You get into the zone. You don't hear anything else going on around you. He trusted us, Coach Knight did, trusted us enough that we were going to find the right situation for that moment. So I went inside to Daryl Thomas, and he didn't have anything. As a senior, he could have forced it up there. And he passed it back out to me, and then I had to make a play.
Smart takes the shot, and the Hoosiers with 3 seconds.
And the ball goes in, and that's when I hear the explosion of noise.
Indiana wins the championship. Keith Smart is the hero.
I get a lot of attention, but it was all the things that each guy on that team did to get us in that position to help us win that game. When we come back to school from time to time, to hear you show your Big Ten ring, and it's great to have your Big Ten ring, but only a few of us can walk in there and put our championship ring up there. And we all are bonded together by the ring.
But for some reason, I don't know why Coach did it, except I think I hit Alford for a couple shots, or I hit Daryl and hit Steve. He took Ricky out when he put Keith back in, and then that allowed Keith not to handle the ball. And so now I'm handling the ball. Keith started cutting around, and yeah, he went bonkers. We only had 4 guys score.
That's crazy.
That'll probably be a record that'll never be beat.
Yeah, that's
we only
a good.
had 4 guys scoring that game. We won the game.
Daryl Thomas, Dean Garrett, Alford, and Smart, probably, right?
Yep. That was the only 4 that scored. And but again, it just goes back to, we had guys that could make plays. Steve was kind of the lead, but Daryl was a really good college. Well, it's amazing. I meet people all the time that have never seen me before, and they all go, man, you're way bigger than I thought. And it's like, well, you know what? You're used to seeing me stand up with Dean and Daryl, and these guys are 6'9", 6'8". Dean was a big guy, and Cyclade was a massive guy.
Massive.
And guys aren't built like that. You just don't. Those guys are gone in the NBA now. You see somebody 6'10", 6'11", they're long, lanky, 18, 19 years old.
Yeah.
Cyclade was 6'10", 235, 240. He was a man. He was a senior.
Yeah.
Derek Coleman at that time was 6'9", 6'10", and he was a freshman, but he was a big guy, but he hadn't built and grown. You can't blame the guy for leaving, being the first guy picked in the draft, but a guy like Cyclade and Garrett, those guys just aren't around in college basketball anymore. Night in and night out, that older player is going to be more consistent and help you win more. We'll go a little bit forward. We had fouled Trish. We were down 3, and we had fouled Trish. And Trish almost airballs, and we get the rebound. It was kind of a funky rebound because the ball gets batted out, and Keith and I go down on a 2-on-1, and Keith lays it in, and that cuts it to 1, and we call timeout, like 29 seconds left. And I remember Coach saying, all right, here's the deal. Do not guard Cyclade. Do not guard Coleman. When they throw the ball into one of those guys, go foul. So Cyclade takes it out. We don't guard Coleman. They throw it to him like perfect. I mean, they didn't even try to get it to anybody else. He was just, why did we just do it right? So we fouled. So we walk down the other deal. Coach calls timeout. We go down, and this is what Coach Knight said in the huddle. When Coleman misses this free throw, I want the first good shot taken. I don't want anybody to rush it, but I don't want to take it down the wire. But get the first good one that we can get and step up and knock it down. But don't force anything because we got plenty of time. And that's all he said.
Everyone thought, even despite that Steve Alford will be the guy to get the last shot.
They're going for the last shot. Now off the Smart. Alford trying to work himself free. Smart down low to Daryl Thomas.
Daryl Thomas got the ball. Daryl Thomas had the wherewithal to get the ball, set a screen, and get the ball back to Keith Smart.
Out to Smart, baseline jump shot in the air, gone! 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 1!
As he's going to the baseline or driving toward the baseline, he dribbles it, then picks it up. He's kind of sliding this way. The basket's here. He's sliding this way as he takes the shot. I mean, so it's not a atypical, fundamental, good shot that he takes, but it goes down.
And that's the definition of Indiana basketball. It doesn't matter who's going to take the shot. We're going to get the best shot we can, and we hope that's going to win the game. It did. It won.
And Coleman missed, and we went down, and they had switched. And obviously, the timeout, they had said, we're going to go to a box and one. And they've been playing man. So when you see Keith and I bring the ball up the court, there's a hesitation of like, oh my gosh, what are they in? Are they in a zone? Well, so now I'm saying, hey, they're in a zone. Well, then Steve cuts and the guy follows him, and I'm like, and I yelled to Keith, hey, box and one. But it just happened to be they kind of lost track of Keith when he made the pass into the post. And Daryl made a good play on not forcing the shot because coach said, look, we got time. But it's a good thing that shot went in because Keith drifted all the way out of bounds, and coach had yelled at him all year, quit drifting to your left when you shoot, quit drifting to your left. And it went in. And then the amazing thing is, in today's game, they would have 4 seconds left because the clock was stopped. And there was 4 seconds. I'm standing in the lane like, oh my God. And I'm looking at the
go.
They're not doing anything. And I mean, I was just amazed because if they took that ball and took off with it, we were all standing in the lane because if you see it, all 4 other guys besides Keith go to the lane. So what we were taught at Indiana, if there was less than 10 seconds to go and a guy made a shot like that, no timeout, we're going. Just go because nobody's going to be set up ready to go. We would not have been set up. If they were taking the ball out and rushed up the floor, we'd have been in a total scramble mode. If you go back and watch that tape, because we're all wondering, why are they not calling timeout? Why aren't they calling timeout? I mean, I remember getting to the huddle and Alfred saying, oh my God, we're going to win this. And I said, we got 1 more second here. Let's see how we are. It's unbelievable. Point though, Alfred goes to coach and says, Coach, get Isle in for me. Because, we want our best jumpers and everything out there. And so Isle got Steve and, it was Dean, Daryl, Keith, Isle, and myself out there. And I'll never forget, they throw that. I mean, he just threw it up in the air. Keith catches it and wings the ball up in the stands. I go, Keith, what are you doing? Keep that ball. He's going to shove that ball. Keep that ball. He hurls it up into the crowd. Those are things that coach talked to you about. And when, you hear all this stuff about Coach Knight, about yelling and screaming and blah, 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 blah. I get so tired of hearing about it. He only did that when we were way ahead or way behind, because when the game was tight, half times were tight, it was calm. The worst time to be in an Indiana locker room at halftime is when you were up 24 or up 20, because there was no relaxation, and he was going to pick out one stupid play and go bonkers just so that we were ready to go in the second half. Anytime things were close, it was nothing but calm. And it was, hey, look, this is what we got to do. This is what we got to be. And he was great. And that's why I said we didn't lose many close games because, one, we were a smart team. We made free throws. And we didn't turn the ball over very much.
That team wasn't expected to be there, and nobody felt that team had the pure talent or the best talent to get to that level. And yet that team found a way to get it done.
When in nutcracker time, I mean, we just didn't. And a lot of that was practices were hard. He put a lot of pressure on guys in practice to perform because he wanted to see who could be in there at the end of games. So he would get on, he'd pick guys out of practice and just needle them and grind on them. And I remember one day my senior year, we had some time off, and he calls me over and says, all right, what do you want to do today? So, I said, everybody's kind of tired, but man, Anderson, he's really bitching about being tired. He goes, all right, let's just rag on Anderson for a half an hour and see how he handles it. I'm like, oh boy. So I go back over to the locker room and I said, all right, Eric, get ready. He goes, what? He goes, just be prepared. This could get ugly. And he's like, what are you talking about? We've won 13, 14, 15 games in a row. And for half an hour, he just blasted Eric. Eric couldn't do anything right. And we got into the locker room after 30 minutes. He kind of kicked us out. And Eric and I sat next to each other in the locker room. He said, I see what you're talking about. I said, well, you shouldn't have told me you were dead tired. He goes, I knew I should have told you that. And then...
And the aftermath was pandemonium. I mean, that's the way I described it in my radio show at the end, because the place was up for grabs. Indiana had won a championship that essentially nobody other than Indiana felt to be won by the school. And I still, to this day, I think it was Coach Knight's best coaching job in the sense of what was at stake and what they won.
I'm sitting there, the media comes in. I think Steve and Keith and Coach had to go to where, and the rest of the media comes in. And Bob Lee from ESPN is in my deal, and he's asking me, so Joe, walk us through the last 29 seconds. So I go through what I just told you. Hey, Coach told us to take the first good shot, all this, that. Well, Coach walks by, back from the main media center room, right when I said, and Coach said, I don't care who takes it. Whoever gets the first good shot, take it. And Coach leans his head in and says, yeah, Bob, but Joe knew not to take that shot. And I just crumple. You know, I'm all fired up. We get back to the hotel, and they're going to serve us some dinner. Nobody's hungry. Nobody wants to eat. I mean, it's, you know, you're on cloud nine. Your adrenaline's flying. And he walks in and he says, all right, bus is leaving tomorrow at 7 a.m. Do not be late. And remember who you're representing. You're representing Indiana University tonight. I'll see you at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We walked out. We all went down to Bourbon Street. It was crazy. But yeah, no, I mean, the afterwards was a lot of fun. I mean, how could you not have fun when you win? But being on Bourbon Street, just, I mean, I don't know where it could be better. I mean, maybe down in Bloomington, or not Bloomington, but maybe in Indianapolis if they blocked all the streets off at the end of a game. But there were so many people from IU down there. The whole streets of Bourbon Street were loaded with IU people. It's really kind of neat. Somebody got a picture from the floor or something where they took a picture of me, and up in the reflection up in the scoreboard is my image. So you see me on the floor and up in the image of the thing, and it's pretty cool picture. So just a neat, you know, it was a great atmosphere to play in the, because it was really dark in there. And like when you go play at the Hoosier Dome with the bubbles, you know, it was light. It was a tough shooting background. And the Superdome wasn't that bad because they pretty much only lit the floor and everything else was a decent background. So it wasn't like playing in some of these locations that they play in now where you're just looking up into outer space. Oh, yeah. No, that Freddie Banks, man, he went nuts on us the last 2 minutes because we were up 8-10, and he just kept draining threes over me and Isle. I remember one time Isle and I switched, and Isle gets on him, and he shoots one in the corner, kind of fading away, and Isle just looks at me and goes, I don't know what we can do on that. No, look, like Steve Isle, for example. Man, Steve Isle came in and just did his job, all right? He rebounded. He defended. He'd score on a breakaway. He'd get a tap, and all of a sudden you look up, Steve's got 6 points and 6 rebounds, and he's defended, and you go, oh, all right, well, you know what? That was perfect for what we needed. And the other great thing that Steve Isle did for us is if they had good defensive guards and were pressuring, we'd look at that guy laugh and flip it to Steve Isle, and he'd just bring it up against some 6'7" guy like it was no big deal. And so, you have guys that fit pieces. And Coach and I used to say all the time, look, you don't have to score to make a positive contribution to the team winning. And I go back to only 4 guys scored in the championship game, but we won because we had good contributions from everybody that played.
I was ready for the game and playing, but I wasn't really into the game.
That made Knight hot. He's going to take Smart out of the ballgame.
Coach called me and said, I'll give you a couple of minutes to go in and play. And if you haven't played well in those couple of minutes, I'm taking you out. And if I take you out, I can't use you the rest of the night.
Nobody stopped the clock. Nobody stopped the clock.
The biggest thing was, why isn't anybody moving?
I remember looking down at the bench and I'm going, I can't believe they're not calling timeout.
I just remember grabbing Keith and I'm kind of like got my arm behind him like, I just can't believe you just did that.
That's when I heard the explosion of noise again. That's when I started to see people again.
Thanks to Smart's brilliant final minutes, Indiana had national title number 5, the third under Bob Knight.
Coleman throws the ball to Cycli. He damn near beats the ball to Cycli. So now we've got a double team on Cycli. You'd have won that game, and this would be hard for a kid to do, but you would have won the game if Coleman would have stayed out of bounds. But he steps in bounds, and Keith Smart. Now, Keith Smart does two things that were more important than the shot he made, and this is one. So now Cycli has the ball. He's doubled up. Coleman comes in. Cycli throws it to Coleman. Keith is out here on the floor, but right in front of our bench. And on the pass to Coleman, Keith tries, damn near slaps the ball, but doesn't quite get it. And he grabs Coleman's arms and spins him around, and they call a foul on Keith. That was the thing that cost you the game. I mean,
you knew Coleman was not a clutch free throw shooter, or you knew that he just wasn't a good free throw shooter?
He just wasn't a good free throw shooter. He had a very low percentage. He was the best guy to foul, but I've always made...
And missed two.
Huh?
And missed two. He missed
missed both of them.
You were just hoping he'd miss one, figuring the odds.
No, I don't pray for little things. I said, God, help that son of a bitch miss both of them out there. So don't bother the Almighty with chicken shit stuff. Make it something that's really going to be worthwhile.
Ever nervous you were going to maybe lose that game? You're playing against three guys that end up being three pretty good pros. You didn't have one pro on your team.
Well,
that's what kills me, man.
But then what happens now is he misses the two free throws, and we got another situation where another great play. A kid named Daryl Thomas is under the bucket, and he gets the ball. Now there's probably, I don't know, maybe 12, 14 seconds left.
Move the basketball accordingly. Secondly, I can screen, either a back screen, a down screen, or a cross screen to help a teammate get open. And we're going to feed the shooter coming into position to take the shot without using the dribble. Okay.
He gets the ball, and now Cycli and Coleman have him umbrellaed. And I would be willing to bet that this is the only player that was ever smart enough to do this. Instead of going up and getting it blocked, which ends the game, he gives a little fake, has some room, and throws the ball out to Smart, who's wide open.
Smart wasn't the first option, obviously. Or was it not like that?
Well, it was whoever we could. Alford was the first option.
Right.
But they really defended him. We couldn't get him the ball. But in all the 40 years that I coached, that's the smartest play I ever saw. When Daryl Thomas shot fake to get a little room, he spun, threw the ball to Smart about 15 feet away. He hit the jump.
We were a team. We were very together. We didn't care who got accolades or who did this, who did that. We depended on each other all the time.
I may have made the shot, but we all had the same championship ring, and that's what we've tried to communicate with each guy talking about how important the team was.
Thank you for joining us for this look back at the 1987 Indiana Hoosiers. Iconic Seasons is a Principal podcast production. I'm your host and executive producer, Aaron Meyer. Special thanks to all our guests for sharing their journeys. If you enjoy this series, head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you leave us a rating and review. It really helps us, and it helps others discover the show. If you're interested in a bonus episode, send us your questions via email. Our email address is hardwoodhistory@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next with episode 8, recapping the Final Four game between UNLV and Indiana.